Let's start with why this task force was formed. One factor was persistent requests by undergraduate students to modify the general education diversity requirement. They have repeatedly petitioned the Provost, the Dean for Undergraduate Studies, and the Senate Educational Affairs Committee for changes. Another factor was the combination of student demands following the 2016 national elections and the campus murder of Lieutenant Richard Collins. This prompted creation of two task forces. The first focused on strategies for improving the campus diversity climate and released its report in spring 2018. The second, the Diversity Education Task Force, had responsibility for exploring changes to the diversity curriculum. This presentation outlines the work and recommendations of that second group. A frequent question is who served on this task force. In addition to co-chairs Oscar Barberin and Bill Cohen, it included 5 faculty members with expertise in diversity issues, including Janelle Wong, Lourdes Salamanca Riba, Ebony Shockley Terrell, Thurka Sangaramurthy, and me, Cindy Stevens. We also had the help of 3 undergraduates from student government, Sanam Akpada, Alicia Desai, and Alyssa Conway, and Resident Life Associate Director Stephen Petkas, who helped build the Common Ground Dialogue program. Our charge was to consider how diversity and civic engagement education could help create a more inclusive campus community. Specific elements of our charge were review diversity education on campus and how this could be improved, consider existing research and best practices, examine general education and other educational and training initiatives, and explore how civic engagement education might be incorporated. This was added because the university system has been concerned about political polarization in the U.S. and asked member universities to expand education in this area. We approached our charge by seeking answers to 4 questions. What are the characteristics of effective diversity and civic engagement education? What are we currently doing on campus in these areas? What steps might be taken to strengthen this work? And how might we introduce and scale these changes for our campus? To answer these questions, we reviewed a wide range of university historical documents. We also relied on relevant research findings as summarized in a 2016 Association for the Study of Higher Education report, Rethinking Cultural Competence in Higher Education. That ASHE report was pivotal for understanding state-of-the-art diversity education. We also reviewed existing campus programs and conducted a focus group with a student advisory board for the Office of Undergraduate Studies. Finally, we interviewed faculty, staff, and students from all different corners of campus. So what did we learn? The ASHE report highlighted several issues, including the value of connecting diversity issues to identity development, which helps students find relevance in this content, and the importance of building skills such as empathy or intergroup learning. It also clarified how the campus infrastructure can unwittingly undermine changes in diversity education. For example, predominantly white institutions like the University of Maryland often lack conditions to create a supportive environment for racial minority students. If we fail to recognize and change those conditions, students' experiences in informal campus settings can undermine the benefits of any diversity curriculum. 2 additional points were that students' first-year experiences are foundational in setting the tone and impact for later diversity education, and that ongoing faculty development is critical for creating inclusive learning environments. Regarding the current status of our diversity education, we noted that students' earliest diversity instruction on campus, namely UNIV 100 and the first-year book, is not mandatory for all new students. Our current Gen Ed diversity requirement is 2 courses with flexibility as to whether students take a skill-building course. Students told us that their general education courses were sometimes taken late in their degree programs, which reduced their potential benefits to the campus diversity climate. We do offer many opportunities for students who seek out diversity-related experiences, such as global classroom courses and education abroad, yet this creates unevenness in diversity education. Some students may graduate with little or no diversity education, whereas others find a rich and robust curriculum. Finally, regarding our campus infrastructure, the climate survey and self-study offered several key points. The response of senior leaders to past hate bias incidents has caused many in the campus community to question their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Black and Latino faculty, staff, and students report feeling less safe on campus and a lower level of institutional commitment to diversity. And finally, although many campus units do offer diversity and inclusion initiatives, the university's size and decentralized structure means that, practically speaking, these initiatives tend to duplicate effort while at the same time isolating their benefits to individual units. Based on those findings, several principles drove our recommended changes to the undergraduate curriculum. First, we wanted the aspirational values identified by the Joint President-Senate Task Force to be shared early and broadly as the foundation for a constructive learning environment for all students. We also wanted to make sure that diversity education would be available to all students throughout their campus experience. Intellectually, diversity education has progressed beyond a static, generic view of culture in that unique cultural details and history matter. Given the state's historical treatment of Black and Indigenous populations, the university's location in Prince George's County and its 95-year exclusion of Black faculty and students, and the racial reckoning that emerged during 2020, we agreed that spotlighting issues of race and racism would be an appropriate campus-wide starting point for particularizing the study of culture and diversity. In line with the ASHE report, we agreed that an emphasis on identity formation and self-reflection would help students find greater relevance in their diversity education. And consistent with both the ASHE report and university system concerns about political divisiveness, we wanted to promote skill development for engaging with others who differ from oneself. We tried to balance these principles with several constraints. We wanted to avoid increasing the number of required credit hours for graduation so as not to slow down students' degree progress. We wanted to balance required with voluntary components, given evidence that making diversity education mandatory can reduce its effectiveness. We agreed that it was important to work toward broad involvement of the campus community, with an emphasis on the colleges in shaping and delivering diversity education for their graduates. And finally, we agreed that these changes require additional resources for staff in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the Teaching and Learning Transformation Center, as well as to support faculty members in modifying their courses and teaching skills. Now let's review the task force's recommendations. First, students need to be introduced and oriented to campus in ways that make clear our aspirational values and expectations for an inclusive, respectful learning environment. This can be achieved in several ways. One is through the development and delivery of a pre-arrival online training module that clarifies those aspirational values. This recommendation predated the campus-wide Terrapin Strong initiative, which launched in 2020. But would dovetail nicely with it as an introduction to that program. Beyond that, we explored ways to enhance UNIV 100 instructor training and provide incentives for greater participation in the first-year book program. Our second set of recommendations involved changes to general education. For the diversity requirement, we recommend changing its structure so that students take one theory-oriented and one practice-oriented course. For theory-oriented courses, we propose that all approved courses must include some content pertaining to race and racism. For practice-oriented courses, we propose a broader set of behavioral learning outcomes to build student skills. In addition, we endorse changes that are being pilot tested in academic writing and oral communication to add content focused on diversity and civic engagement. A third area includes increasing the awareness and attractiveness of our many optional diversity and civic education opportunities through the use of micro-credentials. By tracking and awarding micro-credentials to students who participate in these programs and marketing the value of their skills to prospective employers, we can create incentives for students to participate in these programs and for faculty to offer such programs. Finally, we recommend that all colleges and departments examine their major degree requirements with the goal of adding or improving discipline-specific diversity education. Faculty would identify diversity-related learning outcomes and instructional methods, such as modifying existing coursework or adding professional development workshops. Many academic units already offer such content, so expanding this across campus would enable us to learn from and build on those efforts. Proposed changes to the General Education Diversity Requirement, if adopted by the University Senate, will be substantive, although consistent with the intent of that requirement when it was first modified in 2010. Let me start by describing the current diversity requirement as the basis for understanding what would and would not change. Currently, the diversity requirement comprises 2 courses and a minimum of 4 to 6 credit hours. The 2 categories of courses are Understanding Plural Societies, which are more theory-oriented, and Cultural Competence, which were designed to be practice-oriented. Students can fulfill the diversity requirement by taking 2 theory-oriented courses or 1 theory and 1 practice-oriented course. This was a compromise when the current general education program was adopted due to concerns that it might take time for faculty members to create a sufficient number of practice-oriented courses. Courses can qualify as either Understanding Plural Societies or Cultural Competence, but not both. Of the learning outcomes currently connected to each category, only one is required in Cultural Competence. I will show and explain that one in a moment. Faculty choose a subset of the learning outcomes on which to focus. Under the task force recommendation, the number of required courses and credit hours would not change. The category labels would change as a signal that we were trying to accomplish something different. Also, the requirement would change in line with the original intent, 1 theory and 1 practice-oriented course. There would be a required outcome focused on race and racism in the theory course, and a broader set of behavioral learning outcomes from which to choose for the practice-oriented course. Beyond the required learning outcome in each category, faculty would still be able to choose which of the learning outcomes they wish their courses to meet. Let's now consider what would change in the specific learning outcomes for each category, starting with the theory-oriented courses. On the left side, you'll see the current Understanding Plural Societies learning outcomes, whereas the right side shows revised learning outcomes under a new label. The first change to notice is the required learning outcome for racism. The rationale for this proposed requirement is multifaceted. Fundamentally, the task force felt that the university's current generic approach for engaging with diversity has not been effective, and it wanted to make issues tangible for students by spotlighting a dimension of diversity. The reason for selecting race is that racism and white supremacy have proven to be intractable problems historically and currently. They are intertwined in the history and governance of our nation, state, and university, and they affect societal functioning in many domains such as economics, public health, education, politics, and so forth. Finally, the struggle for racial equality has, to a large extent, provided a template for the struggle for equal rights in many other domains. Note that theory-oriented courses would not need to focus exclusively on race. However, they would need to include discussions of how race intersects with other dimensions of diversity if those were the focus of their course. Turning to other learning outcomes, note that the second captures the ASHE report's emphasis on identity development, whereas Learning Outcome 3 addresses its emphasis on empathy. The remaining 3 learning outcomes are distilled from those in the existing Understanding Plural Societies category, which the task force retained both because they are sound pedagogically and they provide a bridge for existing approved courses to retain that approval. Shifting to the practice-oriented course, this slide shows the current cultural competence learning outcomes on the left and those for the practice-oriented course under a new label on the right. The first learning outcome is both a restatement of a current cultural competence learning outcome and a connection with identity development. The second learning outcome builds on the work of the Joint President-Senate Task Force by sensitizing students to how respect is enacted. And the third learning outcome pertains to empathy and is identical to the empathy learning outcome of the proposed theory-oriented course. This would help faculty members who wish to qualify their courses under both the theory and the practice-oriented categories. The last three learning outcomes address development of behavioral skills to foster a more inclusive, respectful campus climate. A number of existing undergraduate courses teach communication and teamwork skills, so expanding these courses to incorporate diversity would increase the chances that we have enough courses if this recommendation were adopted. Here is what the task force has done and its next steps in considering revisions to the general education diversity requirement. The task force has held several listening sessions during the winter for faculty members who teach general education diversity courses. Over 100 people attended one of these sessions, and we've made our notes summarizing the feedback received available for public review. Task force members did reconsider and revise several learning outcomes based on that feedback, and we do invite ongoing feedback as the proposal works its way through the Senate review process. Relatedly, we are creating an FAQ document summarizing the major questions and the reasoning underlying our decisions. We plan to have that document accessible to the campus community by mid-March 2021. At the same time, the Senate's Educational Affairs Committee is reviewing this proposal during spring 2021 and welcomes campus input on this proposal. Thank you to faculty and staff who generously shared their ideas with us in interviews and listening sessions. We invite you to email your comments and suggestions to our co-chairs,